Linus Torvalds is very well known for crashing out in the Linux kernel, swearing at developers, swearing in the comments, just in general chewing people out over stupid things being done. Usually he's right. There are occasions where maybe he went a little bit too far on people that frankly didn't deserve it. And considering all the new attention that Linux is getting from all these distros that people are talking about, from hardware like the Steam machine, the Steam Deck a couple of years ago, and in general, Linux just becoming more and more of a thing that people talk about, plus it just passing the 35th anniversary of the Linux kernel project, I thought it might be fun to go back and look at some of those crashouts. Now, there is one specific one that I'm not going to be including here because you've all seen it already, and that's the NVIDIA one. And rather than just rehashing one everyone has seen, I want you to learn something new. Let us start off relatively calmly with something which is not really a crash out per se, but does preempt a lot of the other stuff we're going to be talking about. From 1996, in reply to someone saying, "I gave up using curse words to impress somebody 30 years ago. Profanity in comments are not about impressing people. This is about communication. Profanities communicate something, be it good or bad, and they certainly tell you something about the mindset of the person who wrote the code. Nobody has been advocating adding profanities to the code, and in fact, almost everybody seems to agree that at least part of the swear words should go. However, and this is the big thing about this, a wholesale removal of profanities is just stupid and small-minded. Removing profanities without regard to the context or the author who wrote them is a lot worse than the ugly comments there in the first place. If this discussion had started with a simple comment like, maybe we shouldn't be nasty in printed messages, and maybe we should comment out the fucking sun blows me message, then I'd have been more than happy to comply with that. However, it is not okay to just act like a mindless robot and just remove every profanity in sight. That way lies book burning and forbidden thoughts, sugarcoating it with moral reasons, thinking you have the moral right to suppress others is the ultimate immorality. Thus endeth Lessons in Morality 101. I started with this one because, well, for a long time, and even to this day, there's still plenty of profanity in the kernel, so let us get right to that. Let's jump up to 2017 with a reply to a patch from Kees Cook. Kees, stop this idiocy already. These have been false positives. They haven't actually been bugs in the code. They have been bugs in the checking code. In 2 years, when this code is actually trusted, that would be one thing, but right now, it's a fucking disgrace, and you are in denial about the fact that it's checking that is broken, not the code, and are making excuses for shit. That bug is broken. Claiming there was no same way continue is complete and utter bullshit. Seriously, this is the kind of utter garbage that drives me bonkers. Introducing new code that kills the machine, and then not owning the fact that it was your code that was broken, and instead saying, but we had to kill the machine. So get rid of the bug, and get rid of the excuses. We know this code is likely to find these kinds of not really a bug, but the checker code does something we didn't used to do situations. So instead of killing the machine, the code should damn well warn. That way we're going to actually get reports that can improve the code, instead of having people with dead machines with no idea why, and nervous about enabling the debug code that can make things so much worse. Comprende? None of this, there is no way to continue bullshit because it is pure and utter shit. Next up to 2007, we have a question about ODirect. ODirect is a kernel feature to bypass the operating system's cache. Now, most of this is just generally answering a question about what ODirect does, so we're going to skip over the beginning part. As a very concrete example, people think they can just bypass the OS I/O layers and just do the write directly. It sounds like something simple and obvious. It sounds like a total no-brainer, which is exactly what it is. If by no-brainer you mean only a person without a brain will do it, because bypassing the OS has all the subtle effects on both security and on fundamental correctness. The whole point of an OS is to be a resource manager, to make sure that people cannot walk all over each other, and to be the central point that makes sure that different people doing allocations and deallocations don't get confused. In the specific case of a file system, it's trivial things like serializing I/O, allocating new blocks on the disk, and making sure that nobody will see the halfway state when the dirty blocks haven't been written out yet. In short, the whole let's bypass the OS notion is just fundamentally broken. It sounds simple, but it sounds simple only to an idiot who writes databases and doesn't even understand what an OS is meant to do. For some reason, DB people think they don't need one, and don't ever seem to really understand the concept of security and correctness. They understand it sometimes within their own databases, but seem to have a really hard time seeing past their own sandbox. On the topic of security, let's talk about Linus Torvalds, security issues, and responsible disclosure. By the way, you may not like this since you're so focused on security. One reason I refuse to bother with the whole security circus is that I think it glorifies and thus encourages the wrong behavior. In this context, he was talking about, ranking the vulnerabilities, giving them a score, all of this good stuff. It makes heroes out of security people as if the people who don't just fix normal bugs aren't as important. In fact, all the boring normal bugs are way more important just because there's a lot more of them. I don't think some spectacular security hole should be glorified or cared about as being any more special than a random spectacular crash due to bad locking. Security people are often the black and white kind of people that I can't stand. I think the OpenBSD crowd is a bunch of masturbating monkeys in that they make such a big deal about concentrating on security to the point where they pretty much admit that nothing else matters to them. To me, security is important, but it's no less important than everything else. That is also important. There is a reason I eased you in here, and it it only gets better. But first, let's just bring the heat back down just a tiny little bit. In reply to Richard J. Moore back in 2002, are you sure? Isn't what Linus is saying is that he understands that some problems can be solved using dumps, some from the oops message, and some by source code introspection, and some by other means. But he's not interested in a timely resolution. Now, a lot is said here, and a lot of it is frankly not super important, so we'll jump around a bit. Since I'm not personally convinced, it's not going into my tree. It's as simple as that. I take stuff that I feel is good. Often that feeling of goodness comes from trusting the person who sends it to me, simply by past performance. At other times, it is because I think the feature is cool, or well done, or whatever. Hint, if you want stuff in my tree, make me trust you, or work on things that I feel are innately interesting. Don't bother dragging me into your flame wars and trying to convince me that I must apply your patches. If it doesn't go into my tree, is that bad? No. Open source is all about other people being able to make their changes. It by no means means that those changes have to be accepted back. The license basically boils only down to that I must be able to accept them back. But the really important thing, the thing that really makes a difference, is that you, your dog, and your company can make your own changes. If it doesn't have to happen in my tree, then whose tree does it have to happen in? Doesn't much matter actually. You can keep it in your tree for all I care. OSDL has already picked it up and apparently maintains it in their tree. The only thing that matters is whether it gets used or not, and whether it proves itself. OSDL is the Open Source Development Labs, one of the two organizations that merged together to create the Linux Foundation. Never whine about a patch. I know whining works for a lot of people. Oh, for Christ's sake, I'll just do it to get them off my back. But it works remarkably badly with me. Trust me on this. Was this clear enough? Any confusion on any particular issue? In short, convince somebody else. So far, the only thing the discussion has convinced me of is that people somehow seem to think they are entitled to being merged into my tree. Tough. It ain't so. That tree is called Linus Tree for a reason. The only thing you're entitled to is to have your own tree. This entire discussion was about someone being really annoyed that their patches weren't being merged into the kernel, and Linus just saying, well, I run things here. I am the owner. It's my name. Go away if you don't like it. Let's jump up to the modern era with patches from 2025, patches for RISC-V in the 6.17 merge window. These patches were sent a little bit late, and they were outside the time that Linus was going to accept them. No, this is garbage, and it came in too late. I asked for early pull requests because I'm traveling, and if you can't follow that rule, at least make the pull request good. This adds various garbage that isn't RISC-V specific to generic header files, and by garbage, I really mean it. This is stuff that nobody should ever send me, never mind late in a merge window. Like this crazy and pointless make U32 from 2U16 helper. That thing makes the world actively a worse place to live. It's useless garbage that makes any user incomprehensible and actively worse than not using that stupid helper. If you write the code out as A, bit shift 16 plus B, you know what it does and which is the high word, but you need to put a cast to make sure that B doesn't have the high bits that pollutes the end result, so maybe it's not going to be exactly pretty, but it's not going to be wrong and incomprehensible either. In contrast, if you write make U32 from 2U16, you have not a fucking clue what the word order is. In other words, you just made things worse and added that helper to a generic non-RISC-V file where people are apparently supposed to use it to make other code worse. So no, things like this need to get bent. It does not go into generic header files, and it damn well does not happen late in the merge window. You're on notice, no more late pull requests, and no more garbage outside the RISC-V tree. Now, I would hope there is no garbage inside the RISC-V parts, but that's your choice. But things in generic headers do not get polluted by crazy stuff and sending a big pull request the day before the merge window closes in hope that I'm too busy to care is not a winning strategy. So you get to try again in 6.18 early in that merge window and without the garbage. As for another modern one, let's talk about useless links in the commit messages. I've pulled this, but the commentary is strange, and the patch makes no sense to me, so I unpulled it again. And damn it, this commit has that promising link argument that I always hoped would explain why this pointless commit exists. But as always, that link only wasted my time by pointing to the same damn information that was already there. I was hoping that it would point to some oops report or something to explain why my initial reaction was wrong. Stop this garbage already. Stop adding pointless link arguments that waste people's time. Add the link if it has additional information. Basically, this just linked back to itself as a way to explain itself, which is not an explanation. Damn it. I really hate those pointless links. I love seeing useful links, but 99% of the links I actually see just point to stupid, useless garbage that only waste my time again. So I have not pulled this. I'm annoyed by having to even look at this, and if you actually expect me to pull this, I want a real explanation and not a useless link. Yes, I'm grumpy. I feel like my main job, really my only job, is to try to make sense of pull requests, and that's why I absolutely detest these things that are automatically added and only make my job harder. I'm CCing Constantine again because this is a prime example of why that automation hurts, and he was arguing in favor of that shit just last week. Can we please stop this automated idiocy? Let's go to 2015 with Linus Torvalds' take on dbus. And this is the one that made me want to make this video, because I feel like a lot of people do not know about this one. I am still expecting to merge it, mainly for a rather simple reason. I trust my sub-maintainers, and Greg in particular. So when a major sub-maintainer wants to merge something, that pulls a lot of weight with me. That said, I have to admit to being particularly disappointed with the performance argument for merging it. Having looked at the dbus performance and come to the conclusion that the reason dbus performs abysmally badly is just pure shit user space code, I am not at all impressed by the performance argument. We don't merge kernel code just because user space was written. This is a phenomenal line. This is an absolutely phenomenal line. Every time I see it, I lose it. The kernel code has higher standards, and yes, that also means that it tends to perform better, but no, user space code is shit is not a valid reason for pushing things into the kernel. So frankly, the better performance argument is bogus in my opinion. That still leaves other arguments, but it does weaken the case for KDBus quite a bit. Because go out and read pretty much any argument for KDBus, and the first argument is always performance. The articles never say, because the user space dbus code is crap though. Here we have a patch set about dealing with signing keys. David here says, can you pull this patch set please? Not without a lot of discussion first. Quite frankly, this is fucking moronic. The whole thing seems to be designed around stupid interfaces for completely moronic reasons. Why should we do this? I already dislike our existing X509 parser, and this makes the idiotic complicated interfaces go up to 11. In reply to Matthew saying, there's only one signing authority, and they only sign PE binaries, guys, this is not a dick-sucking contest. If you want to parse PE binaries, go ahead. If Red Hat wants to deep throat Microsoft, that's your issue. That has nothing whatsoever to do with the kernel I maintain. It's trivial for you guys to have a signing machine that parses the PE binaries, verifies the signatures, and signs the resulting keys with your own key. You already wrote the code, for Christ's sake. It's in that fucking pull request. Why should I care? Why should the kernel care about some idiotic we only sign PE binary stupidity? We support X509, which is the standard for signing. Do this in userland on a trusted machine. There is zero excuse for doing it in the kernel. Whilst I said I wasn't doing the NVIDIA one, there is a famous one I think we have to talk about, and I think you're going to notice it as we go through it. This is about some audio problems that were breaking Pulse audio. Mauro, shut the fuck up. It's a bug alright in the kernel. How long have you been a maintainer and you still haven't learnt the first rule of kernel maintenance? If a change results in user programs breaking, it's a bug in the kernel. We never, ever blame the user programs. How hard can this be to understand? To make matters worse, the commit is clearly total and utter crap, even if it didn't break applications. NOEnt is not a valid error return from an IOCTL. Never has been and never will be. NOEnt means no such file and directory, and is for path operations. IOCTLs are done on files that have already been opened. There's no way in hell that NOEnt would ever be valid. Shut up, Mauro, and I don't ever want to hear that kind of obvious garbage and idiocy from a kernel maintainer again. Seriously. We do not break user space. Seriously. How hard is this rule to understand? We particularly don't break user space with total crap. I'm angry because your whole email was so horribly wrong and the patch that broke things was so obviously crap. The whole patch is incredibly broken shit. It adds an insane error code, NOEnt, and then because it's so insane, it adds a few places to fix it up. The fact that you can even try to make excuses for breaking user space code and blaming some external program that used to work is just shameful. It's not how we work. Fix your fucking compliance tool because it's obviously broken, and fix your approach to kernel programming. Let us leave the LKML briefly and go over to GitHub. Now, I do have to use an archive for this one because they have closed the PRs, and because the PRs are closed, they're no longer available on the website. Torvalds doesn't typically use GitHub, but this is one of the rare occasions he did. I don't do GitHub pull requests. GitHub throws away all the relevant information, like having even a valid email address for the person asking me to pull. The diff stat is also deficient and useless. Git comes with a nice pull request generation module, but GitHub instead decided to replace with their own totally inferior version. As a result, I consider GitHub useless for these kinds of things. It's fine for hosting, but the pull requests and online commit editing are just pure garbage. I've told GitHub people about my concerns, and they didn't think they mattered, so I gave up. Feel free to make a bug report to GitHub, and the reason why he's so annoyed is Torvalds was the one who created Git. Now, he gave up on the project very quickly, handed it over to another maintainer, but he is the guy that started the project. And to this random guy here, somebody please look at the diff. That's a simple 3-line code addition. I agree to you, Torvalds, but you could have excused it this time. This applies into somebody else just explaining why GitHub is bad, and this is a response to that person. By the way, Joseph, you're a quality example of why I detest the GitHub interface. For some reason, GitHub has attracted people who have zero taste, don't care about commit logs, and can't be bothered. The fact that I have higher standards then makes people like you make snarky comments thinking that you are cool. You're a moron. Just this random guy. You're a moron. Don't talk to me. Let us end it off with a very important one that changed the direction of Linux forever. Not just the Linux kernel, but Linux in its entirety. At the top of the reply chain, I get the impression as soon as we hit RC1, some maintainers immediately go into, oh shit, I can't send patches or Linus will shout at me mode. So regressions, crash fixes, and security fixes is exactly what I want to get after RC3 or so, and yes, I will start shouting at people if other things show up. However, I think your comments show the problem. From a maintainer perspective, seems to me we are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yes, I would prefer to push all stable material even late in the RC game, but that is not how things work nowadays anyway. That's fucking sad. You know why it's sad. Go read the rules for stable patches, because the rules for stable patches are the rules I use for the late RC stuff, and is pretty much exactly what you yourself described as, this is what I send Linus after RC4. Now, that should make you think about the absolute crap you mark for stable. Of course, I suspect I see why this happens. Greg doesn't shout as much as me, and he has been taking any random patch into stable, so the end result is that people think it's easier to mark things as stable than it is to show that it's actually stable, and they are trying to use stable as a way to get any random late fixes in. Do you really not see this? Greg, the reason you get a lot of stable patches seems to be that you make it easy to act as a doormat. Clearly, at least some people say, I know this patch isn't important enough to send to Linus, but I know Greg will silently accept it after the fact, so we'll just wait and mark it for stable. You may need to learn to shout at people. And that seemed, from Linus, like a relatively normal reply. And it was, and the thread continued on relatively normally. But a different thread was made. This was started by Sarah Sharp. Seriously guys, is this what we need in order to get improved stable? Linus Torvalds is advocating for physical intimidation and violence. Ingo Molnar and Linus are advocating for verbal abuse. Not fucking cool. Violence, whether it be physical intimidation, verbal threat, or verbal abuse, is not acceptable. Keep it professional on the mailing lists. Let's discuss this at Kernel Summit where we can at least yell at each other in person. Yeah, just try yelling at me about this. I'll roar back louder. For all the people who lose their voice when they get yelled at by top maintainers, I won't be the nice girl anymore. And Torvalds reasonably matched the energy here. That's the spirit. Greg has taught you well. You have controlled your fear. Now release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me. Come to the dark side, Sarah. We have cookies. After what seemed like a bit of friendly back and forth, we had this one from Sarah. However, I am serious about this. Linus, you're one of the worst offenders when it comes to verbally abusing people and publicly tearing their emotions apart. I'm not going to put up with that shit anymore. And that's when Linus realized this wasn't a joke, this wasn't like a bit of banter, this was going to become a flame war. Yes, and I do it partially, mostly, because it's who I am, and partially because I honestly despise being subtle or nice. The fact is, people need to know what my position on things are, and I can't just say, please don't do that, because people won't listen. I say, on the internet, nobody can hear you being subtle, and I mean it. And I definitely am not willing to string people along either. I've had that happen too, not telling people clearly enough that I don't like their approach. They go on to re-architect something and get really upset when I'm not willing to take their work. Sarah, first off, I don't have that many tools at hand. Secondly, I simply don't believe in being polite or politically correct. And you can point at all those cultural factors where some cultures are not happy with confrontation, and feel free to make it about gender too. I think that's almost entirely cultural too. And please bring up cultural sensitivity while you're at it, and I'll give you back that same cultural sensitivity. Please be sensitive to my culture too. Google management by Percolele. Do you really want to oppress a minority because Finns are a minority compared to almost any other country? If you want to talk cultural sensitivity, I'll join you, but my culture includes cursing. And some of the above is written tongue-in-cheek, but all of it is also serious. I really fundamentally believe that being honest and open about your emotions and core process is good. And because it's damn hard to read people over email, I think you need to be more honest and more open over email. I'm generally nicer in person. Not always. And yes, I'll happily be part of that discussion at the Kernel Summit, but I think you also need to be aware that your high horse isn't necessarily all that high. This thread went on for a very long time, but there is one reply I would like to highlight in particular. Bullshit. The thing is, the victim card is exactly about trying to enforce your particular expectations on others and trying to do so in a very particular way. It's the old think of the children argument, and it's bogus. Calling things professional is just more of the same, trying to enforce some kind of convention on others by trying to claim that it's the only acceptable way. The thing is, different people act and react differently on both sides, and I think we should recognize that and also allow for that. And sometimes it means, for example, that people interact primarily with certain people that they like more because they are a better fit. I think we actually do it very naturally, simply because we are human, and this is how people interact in real life too. Sometimes we do it consciously, the way we have people at various companies that act as go-betweens, but most of the time we do it just because humans are all about social interactions, and we don't even think about what we do and why. For example, you work mostly through Greg. I don't think either of you planned it that way, but it's likely because you guys work well together. See what I'm saying? People are different. I'm not polite and I get upset easily, but generally don't hold a grudge. I have these explosive emails, and that works well for some people, and it probably doesn't work well with you. And you know what? That's fine. Not everybody had to get along or work well with each other, but the fact that it doesn't work with you doesn't make it wrong. This isn't all that different from working around language issues, etc., by having certain people work as in-betweens on that front. And where we differ is in thinking that either side has to necessarily change. You think people need to act nicer, and I think it's natural that people have different behavior and different expectations. We all have different issues somewhere and don't all like each other. There are certain people I refuse to work with, for example. They may be good engineers, but they just aren't people I can work with. And hey, I don't actually think we've personally had any problems, and I realize you may react very strongly and get nervous about us having problems, but realistically, do you actually expect to like all the other kernel engineers? And equally importantly, not everybody has to like you, or necessarily think they have to be liked by you, okay? Because if you want me to act professional, I can tell you that I'm not interested. I'm sitting in my home office wearing a bathrobe the same way I'm not going to start wearing ties. I'm also not going to buy into fake politeness, the lying, the office politics, and backstabbing, the passive aggressiveness, and the buzzwords, because that is what acting professionally results in. People resort to all kinds of nasty things because they are forced to act out of their normal urges in unnatural ways. Why did I spend so much time on this one? Well, this interaction and then the discussions that stemmed from it, these are often cited as the reason why Linus Torvalds briefly stepped down from the Linux kernel project, and also they first introduced their code of conduct. This interaction changed both the Linux kernel and Linux as a community forever. You know what? I actually lied. There is one more, and that is Linus Torvalds' stance on the GPL v3. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having two positions. In many ways, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that we should expect people to have different opinions. Everybody has their own opinion anyway, and expecting people not to have different opinions, especially programmers who are rather opinionated a lot in the first place, is just not realistic. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a very wide consensus among very varied developer base. In fact, I think that's great. And the reason I'm speaking out against the GPL v3 is that it is trying to sort the chaff from the wheat. The FSF is apparently not happy with a wide community appeal. They want their standpoint to be the one that matters. I have all through this discussion tried to explain that the great thing about the GPL v2 is that it allows all these people with totally different ideals to come together. It doesn't have to be perfect for any particular group. Its very perfection comes not from its language, but from the very fact that it's acceptable to a very wide group. When the FSF tries to narrow it down, they kill the whole point of it. The license suddenly is not a thing to get around and enjoy, it's become a weapon to be used to attack the enemy. Here in the US, the only watchable TV news program is The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. One of his fairly recurring themes is about how US politics is destroyed by all these passionate and vocal extremists, and he asks whether there can ever be a really passionate moderate. Can you be passionate about the middle road? Damn it, I want to be a passionate moderate. I'm passionate about just people being able to work together on the same license without this extremism. And that right there is a good place to end it. This video end up being considerably longer than I thought it was going to be. I'm just looking at my clips over here. I don't know how long it is. Apologies. But you learned something, hopefully, about Torvalds ranting, and if you have any ones that maybe I missed out, any additional ones you'd like to see, let me know in the comment section down below. So if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. If you're on mobile, go and hype the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribe Daily Bearer Pay link in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and he has plenty more years left to say something crazy.